I'm going to talk about how to handle conflict effectively and come out of it smiling and actually having made a sort of good solution with whoever it is you're in conflict with. Conflict is where there's a difference of opinion between two or more people and where they perceive a threat to their needs or their interests. And that usually sort of what goes along with conflict is usually some emotional response to conflict. And some of us will have learned some really good techniques in how to manage conflict effectively. And some of us will have learned some interesting ways of handling conflict that aren't necessarily so useful to us now that we're grown up. So that's why sometimes it's useful to go on courses to learn about how to manage conflict effectively, to help us learn different ways of dealing with conflict and find a whole range of tools so that we can always pull out the right tool for the right job to handle the situation well and get a good result. Particularly in parent forums, a lot of the time you've got lots of different people coming together, both in the forum itself and when the forum are sort of out there working with other agencies, there's potential for differences of opinion about how money should be spent, what it should be spent on, how things are operated, what's important. There's lots of potential for conflict. People who are running the parent forums really need to know how to both handle conflict effectively, but also the steps they can take to minimise the amount of conflict.
And should forums be concerned if they find that there's conflict?
No, I think forums should expect conflict, and I think if you're involved in running a forum, I think if you can actually kind of get to a point where you think of conflict as a creative opportunity rather than something really awful, then you're more likely to be able to create a wider range of choices by getting people to kind of look differently and not just take one view, but think of potentially more options, more ideas, more ways of doing something. Then you're more likely to kind of diffuse any conflict.
So when conflict does happen, what are some of the things that people do sometimes that can make it worse or escalate it?
Well, to make things worse, some of the behaviours that people do are things like belittling the other person, not listening, talking over, interrupting. Those are the kind of things that can really make the situation worse and escalate the conflict to a level where it's actually you can't actually deal with it effectively. You can use judgments about people, take sides in a discussion. That will just kind of fuel the conflict. Whereas if you want to calm things down and de-escalate conflict, if you actually take an objective position, so put yourself outside of the conflict and actually just look at things objectively, don't make any judgments about what people are saying, but listen really carefully. Really good listening is key to managing conflict effectively and calming things down. If you really do listen, then that goes a long way to calming conflict down. In order to get that sort of objective position, people really have to sort of just take the position of being curious and interested in what people are saying and the different views that are being expressed. And actually not be emotionally attached to whatever is being said. Actually just sort of cut off your own emotions from the situation. Then you're actually going to be more able to take an objective view and listen more carefully to what people are really thinking about the situation and help them to think through the situation. Because sometimes, the first things that come out, from people are sort of more the emotional response. And actually, if you want to get people to be able to take a more considered approach, if you are in that third position that's more objective, then you're more likely to help people do some good thinking and think through the sort of logics and the facts of a situation rather than how they feel about it, and sort of get to a better conclusion. No matter what the situation or the sort of area of conflict, the same key principles apply. Step one is to sort out your own emotional state, because if you're feeling nervous, hurt, angry, confused, it's not the right emotional state to deal effectively with conflict. So step one is to get yourself into a good emotional state. And nobody else controls your emotions and your feelings apart from you. So you need to kind of just, if you could practice being able to just click like a switch, so you can actually kind of move from feeling in a negative state to a more positive state, which could be things like being calm, relaxed, focused, and kind of in good listening mode. That's a good starting sort of point for a positive emotional state that will help you to deal effectively with whatever conflict you're faced with. So whether it's with the local authority, senior director, or the chief executive of the local council, or whether it's in your forum, you being in a good emotional state is key. And if you need a bit of time to get yourself into that state, then do take it. You can use an excuse to go and get a cup of tea, or you can actually say, if you need to look after yourself, it's fine to say, I can't deal with this now, but I think it's really important. Can we deal with it at another time? And make an arrangement to phone them or to meet up with them, whatever is most appropriate. But look after your own emotional state first. That's key. If you're not in a good state, nothing's going to be in a good state. So look after yourself first. Next would be about really focusing on what's your positive intention. If you're in a sort of situation of conflict where you're having to deal with these differences of opinion, actually being clear for yourself about what's your positive intention. Is it that you want to put your point across, that you want everyone else to take your side, to be, for your side to win whatever position it is you're taking? If that's your intention, then the conflict is not going to go well. Managing the conflict is not going to go well. So you need to be in a sort of really think through, what is your intention? Is it to understand the other person's perspective, or if it's to bring mutual understanding of the different perspectives, then that's more a positive intention for both sides. It needs to be positive for you and the other person if you're going to stand any chance of resolving the conflict effectively. So actually being clear about what it is you want to achieve, what's your positive intention. And the next thing is back to good listening. I don't think I could emphasise listening sort of enough. It's where the whole sort of conflict situation begins to unravel, and you begin to develop your understanding of the situation. So this is about unravelling it, and the listening is key. And the thing I would say about listening is that often when you're listening to someone, they will pause and stop for a moment. And that can sometimes, for some people, feel uncomfortable, and then they want to fill that space. So don't fill the space, but give the person time to think and then to come back and say more. So when you think you've done enough listening, do some more listening, because that will really help the person to think through for themselves, because it may be you need to do very little but this step of listening. Because if you listen well, the person may actually resolve the issue themselves and actually be able to reflect on their own position in the conflict and really what they want. And in terms of unravelling conflict, good listening is the starting point. And then the next step you need to take is to actually start to ask some really good questions to clarify your understanding of what's being said and help the person reflect on the situation and think of how else the situation might be and other people's perspectives. So asking good questions at this point, can be helpful, but you have to do enough listening first before you actually start asking any questions. And to start with, ask questions to clarify your understanding and to get to the facts and to start unravelling what's their perspective as opposed to what's a fact. Because often people think that their perspective of what someone said, what they did, is actually a fact, but actually sometimes it could be their perspective and just how they perceive it based on their own kind of judgments about somebody. So it's important to clarify what's a fact, what was actually said. Did somebody really say that they were the most awful person in the world, or is that just their perception of what the person said? Did they actually say something else? So you really need to be careful and just help the person to clarify and separate out what's a fact and what's perception. And also to you can separate out at this point how they're feeling about something. So you separate out feelings, perception, and and facts. And then you're kind of another way there. It's another part of the sort of unravelling and beginning to resolve conflict. So you really need to be a good listener and ask some good questions. If somebody's actually kind of talking about their own perception or their own beliefs about how a situation should be and what should be happening, then that word should will be coming out a lot. They should do this, they should do that, it must be this, they ought to do that. Those are about people's beliefs about what's true about the world, and that is about people's perception. So you really then need to get to what are the facts. And the facts can include things like what are the rules, what's policy and procedure, what's the law. All of those things are really sort of key. What are the rules of how the forum operates? You know, does that need tightening up? Do you need to kind of actually, put something together? All of those things will kind of come into play in terms of unravelling sort of what the conflict's really about and understanding what's a fact and what's perception. You can ask the person or ask the forum, if it's conflict within the forum, you can actually ask people what they think the solution is, what it is they really want. Refocus people's attention on what they do want rather than what they don't want. Because in conflict, a lot of attention can be given to the things that people don't want, the horrible stuff, the sort of, what they think someone else has done or all the negativity. So actually you need to refocus people's attention onto what they do want instead, how they'd like it to be, what they think the solution is, what they'd like to have, how they would like this to be resolved. So it just refocuses people's thinking and their attention onto what they do want rather than what they don't want. The final and important thing is to agree any action points so that everybody's clear about what the next steps will be and who's going to be doing what, and agree any kind of dates for things to be done by and whether you need to have a further conversation, those kind of things. So action points are sort of key, if there are any. It could be that you've just reached a mutual understanding and that's fine. But if there are action points, it's kind of good that everybody's clear about what's actually going to be happening next and who's going to do what. Sometimes it can be useful to kind of make notes about it, to put it on flip chart if it's within the forum and you're having the conflict is within the forum meeting, then it's useful to flip chart it so everybody's really clear, minute it, or send it around in an email, and agree who's going to do that, of course, as one of the action points, so that everybody really knows what they're going to be doing. There are lots of ways that forums can sort of plan their meetings to minimise the opportunity for conflict and just create an atmosphere where differences are a good thing, where different views are welcomed and valued. Some of the ways that you can do that within your forum meetings are to split up the forum group for discussions about different things. If you need ideas, put people into little groups, give them some flip chart paper and a pen, and say you want as many ideas about a particular topic. And then everybody's got an opportunity to contribute. Their idea will have been heard, it's on paper, and then you can start to sort of whittle down by bringing people back and kind of looking at what are the options that people really like. So that's one way of kind of minimising the need for conflict, or actually kind of making good use of differences. Another option is having either a constitution or a set of rules about how they're going to work together, or just an agreement about how they're going to operate their meetings, so that everybody who comes to the forum is kind of given a copy and it is clear about what's expected, about how the meetings are going to run, and about things like timekeeping and having a clear agenda, so everybody knows what the topics are that are going to be discussed and can have an opportunity to input into that agenda. Those are kind of some of the other. They feel like small things, but actually they can make a big difference to how forums kind of are run. I would say that really kind of creating a sort of an open and honest forum where people feel comfortable and feel they can express their views without judgment. That's kind of key. So having some agreement between you all about how you're going to work together, so that people feel that their views are going to be respected, and just thinking about how you're going to discuss various agenda items. So just think through what can you do to give everybody in the group an opportunity to contribute. And some of that is about mixing people up into the different groups. Some of it is about when you do find that there are opposing views, and maybe strong opposing views, that you actually kind of find a way to come up, just generate some more options. So you can ask quite good questions like, how else could we do this? What else might be a solution? What other options have we got in how we deal with this? So don't just become entrenched in those two opposing views, but you can actually kind of, find other ways so that people can see that there are other options, there are other choices. And then it sort of frees up people's kind of thinking a bit. So to round up, remember, good listening is key, as is looking after number one, because if you're not looking after you, then maybe others aren't. So look after yourself first, then good listening, and ask some good questions. Get really good at asking good questions to really help people think through what it is that they're really thinking and what it is they really want. And do remember in forums, if you get to a conflict situation, just start asking people what it is they really want. That can really help reshift kind of people's thinking and get them sort of focused onto something a bit more positive. So I hope that you all learn to sort of enjoy the creativity that conflict can bring and manage it well. And I look forward to hearing more about that over the next few years. And good luck to you all.